Before we get started, just want to thank Ty Corbin and his staff. It was a very difficult decision-making process
the NBA making a coaching change.
that
Yes,
our
Mike, that's correct.
team undertook.
GM Dennis Lindsey.
There was a lot of deliberation. We made the decision today at 11 o'clock. We met with Ty at 1 to deliver the news. But before we get started with questions, everyone should know that Ty's a man of dignity, class, integrity, and we'll do nothing now in this press conference or moving forward that would disparage him, coaches in any way. Today we're grateful for a period that they saw us through, and following Coach Sloan's, in many ways, as you guys, ladies as well, know, is like, following John Wooden. And Kevin and Randy and Bob and the Miller family made a tough decision there soon after to trade Darren Williams. A decision from afar, at the time looked like it was a good one, and now as being part of the Jazz organization, something that helped build our new foundation. As you guys know, there was a lockout year. There was last season with new parts and a changing team, and Ty and the staff performed admirably. And then, as most of you know, last offseason we had a bunch of decisions to make relative to veterans and young guys, and a look forward to see how many guys, at high salary slots we could pay, and we decided to not go young, but extremely young. And as Ty and the staff noted, continuously, it's a very difficult position to put coaches in, but it was one that we still felt like when we visiting with ownership, management, our scouts, our coaches, it was the right decision. And today we again made a very important decision for the franchise, but as much as anything, again, we want to express our gratitude towards Ty and the staff. So with that, I can answer your questions.
How much of a philosophical difference was there between Ty and the front office, if any?
I think you'd have to, it's hard for me to speak intelligently on how other people feel. I can only tell you how I feel. And whatever staff that I was been on, if this will give you a little color to the background of your question, there's going to be debate and active debate. And there's going to be agreements and disagreements on the strategy that you use and the practice plans and the personnel. And so that's just part of being, part of an NBA club. And it's what makes the job so great that, the team and the debate and the competition. So there's always going to be thoughts around that. And, there from 5,000 feet, there were philosophical things. And as most of you know, sometimes you can have a philosophy that has great synergy, but it just be the wrong time for a marriage or for a relationship. And sometimes there are going to be differences of opinion on whether it be personnel or what you're doing with the personnel. So I think you have to assume that there was, there were some different thoughts, and again, that's one of the reasons why we made the decision we made today.
Dennis, would the coaching decision be inside the organization, or are you looking more outside?
A couple things, and I appreciate the question. We wanted to either come today with extension talks towards Ty or make a decision that we're going to move in a different direction. So literally we haven't had one conversation in regards to other names, the criteria. We needed to complete this and give Ty and the staff full consideration for this. Now that the decision's closed, we'll meet quickly internally. We'll set some criteria. We'll look at some objective measures. We'll look at some subjective measures about coaches and who's going to be the new leader for the Utah Jazz. and then, you know, define some timelines relative to how we're going to interview and who we're going to interview. I'm very confident in the group and our experience and our networking contacts that will come up with a good decision going forward. But frankly, you know, for any of you that have questions in regards to the search itself, we're not going to limit ourselves prematurely by defining any, you know, people or objectives that we're looking for or criteria. We want to go into at least the early stages, that to be a very objective process. And then, as you guys would suspect, as we move through the process, it will become very subjective and very criteria based upon, you know, what we need moving forward.
How much of the team's defensive performance had to do with the decision that was made today?
So, you know, look, guys, we're not going to get into real deep into details. You know, it's part of the criteria that we laid forth, but frankly, it's part of the criteria that all 30 teams have, you know. And I think at the end of the day, the championship caliber teams are somewhere inside the top 5 or 6, both offensively and defensively. And I would say this: being a defensive program going forward is very important to who we are and what we want to be, and we want to establish that foundation.
What's the status of guys like Alex Jensen, Brad Jones, Sidney Lowe, Mike Sanders moving forward?
So we've talked to all the assistant coaches. The Millers wanted to express their gratitude to the assistant coaches and just how loyal they were to Ty over the years, and you know, we appreciate them and their expertise. The Millers were very generous in many ways towards the coaching staff, and status going forward is, again, unknown. We're going to get through this phase, and then we'll talk about whether, you know, there's ability for guys to stay or if we can help them elsewhere, or will there be internal candidates. Again, we just don't want to be bound by anything that we say, you know, on a press conference today.
What would you have liked to have seen from the team that would have made the situation better? Because obviously there was something lacking that you guys came to this decision.
Sure. Yeah, so a couple things. One, it wasn't, when you're saying looking, I think the connotation that it's just this present season that just ended. And so there was a lot of evaluation before I got here, frankly. One, to make, you know, Ty the successor to Jerry Sloan. And as most of you know, Kevin O'Connor's continued with the Jazz organization in a different role, and we have Walt Perrin and David Fredman and Richard Smith and Randy Rigby and Bob Hyde, who've all been here 20 plus years now. So really, as a group, the Miller family, myself, Justin, Bart, you know, we were looking at a lot of different criteria over multiple years. And again, instead of getting into the details that, you know, wouldn't be appropriate, we feel at this time we're just going to stand by the decision, and that it was a multi-year decision.
Dennis, what was Ty's reaction when you spoke with him this morning?
So, as you would suspect, disappointed, and I don't want to speak for Ty and, you know, all the adjectives that I'm sure you guys will find him in due time. But first class, you know, completely professional. You know, they're wish us the best as we wish him the best. You know, he's Jazz fiber through and through, and again, just what you would think. He's a gentleman in every way.
Was this decision made last year and just not follow through because of financial purposes?
Absolutely not. No, absolutely not.
Is there any regret that a decision wasn't made earlier to get the growth of the young guys going sooner with their new head coach?
None whatsoever. None whatsoever. Again, you know, I, Kevin, Randy, decided to pick up Ty's option last year. We'll stand by that, Jody. He's a good man. He's a good coach. As you guys know, our team stayed together. It stayed together under 3+ years of volatile change, and frankly, Ty gets credit for that. So, no, to both of those
Were there
questions.
times where Ty didn't follow direct orders from you guys as far as playing time with young guys or anything to that sort?
You know, I know you have to ask the question, and you guys need to understand this. This is from the Laytons to the Sloans to Ty, and really the go forward guys. The head coach here, as Kevin O'Connor said, is Babe Ruth. They're going to decide playing time. The Jazz players that we had last year that will be back, they'll have that preseason meeting that we have, and if their agents or them have questions in regards to playing time, opportunity, the ball, whatever it is, the head coach's door is open and they can go discuss that. But in no way will ownership or management dictate that going forward, just like we didn't dictate it now and in the past, because there's a lack of order, and here the head coach needs to be in charge of playing time. Are there discussions in regards to that? Absolutely. Are you going to agree on every point from game to game? Certainly not, but that stands to reason. It's just like your job. So, but there was no direction. We wanted the coaching staff to coach them hard, to coach them fairly, and then make the decisions on playing time, because they're the best judges of who deserves to play and who doesn't.
Did you agree with this decision to only play the 5 foundation guys?
I think the criticism that Ty took over the last few years relative to the young guys, more times than not missed the mark. I think Ty did a fine job in determining who should play and rotations, and we're completely comfortable with the minutes that our young guys got last year.
Dennis, do you anticipate that this idea that the head coach is Babe Ruth will be, I guess, appealing to somebody as you go forward with your coaching search?
I would think so. I think the Jazz organization stands for a lot of different things, and I think the head coach really having the authority to act. So if there's a player that wants to circumvent that process, meaning going to me or going to Randy or going to ownership, we just aren't going to allow it. Again, if the player or the player's agent has issues, the coach has always had an open door policy, and we found out that for the chemistry of the team, for the integrity of the team, and it was this way in Houston and this way in San Antonio, so it's one of the reasons why I came here, was not a foreign hierarchy to determine playing time and determine what that was best for the team, that the players need to know that the coach is in charge of the minutes. And Randy and I and Kevin have talked about that on numerous times, and we anticipate that will be the same. And I would think it would be an attractive job because of that.
You've had a lot of roles in your time throughout the league. What have you found are successful characteristics of a good head coach?
So there's a personal character, there's a work ethic, there's a competitive DNA, there's coaching acumen, strategic ability to think on your feet. There's so many things that go into that job, and it's a very tough job in so many ways. But so that and more, I think NBA players want honesty and the truth as soon as you know it. I think they want somebody that gives them a good game plan that they can rally behind. And I think they want a coach that will, push them physically, but not push them to the point where, the practice or playing environment becomes unsafe.
What kind of time frame are you looking at here?
Really don't know. We had some of those internal discussions right after we made the decision, and the only thing that Randy and Bob and Kevin and I could tell the Miller ownership group is however long it takes to get the best man in the seat.
Did anybody come in management or ownership come to Ty's defense? Was there debate back and forth?
Yeah,
or was
Jody,
this kind of unanimous?
we're not going to get into the the mechanics of how we made a decision. I can say this: so it was a collective decision. There were what we laid out to ownership previously is that we were going to look at areas where there were positives, and there were a very significant number of positives, where we were average at, whether it's subjective measures, objective measures, and areas that we were challenged in, and then just discuss those point by point, prioritize them. So as you would imagine, there were several different areas that Ty graded very well.
Will you consult Jerry Sloan in the coaching search?
So we, out of respect for Coach and our staff, we tried to let everybody know in a timely fashion, an orderly fashion, as much as we can. And I don't want to speak for Jerry. Obviously he has great feelings and emotion for Ty, and he needs to be, in our opinion, a friend to Ty during this period. And then if Coach is comfortable helping us through this process, then as Randy and I expressed to him in the conversation, we want and in many ways need his help.
Dennis, even if you can't give us names, have you identified a short list and how many names might be on that list?
No, really, again, when I say we want to have the full platter in front of us, we don't want to define the search in any way. We want to take a step back and look at some internal criteria, but we literally have not spent 1 minute on that, because the decision on Ty and his staff was at the forefront, and again, that didn't get decided until a little bit before 11 today.
Considering how important the summer is to the franchise in terms of personnel movement,
sure.
In terms of the draft, is it important for you guys to have an expedited process, or is it not important, and can the scouting staff and can you and Randy, can you handle some of the heavy lifting in terms of the draft and in terms of free agency? Yeah,
it's a great question, Tony, and certainly it would be perfect if we found the right person in a short time frame, but short time frame relative to draft workouts and free agent minicamp and summer league training camp and summer league. We need to find the right person first. So timelines will be dictated by finding the right person, not trying to arbitrarily fit it into a timeline just so they're available to us right after the draft lottery. Now, if we can find the right person in short order, we will work very hard to do so, but we're going to be really thorough in this process because it's such a monumental decision, as you guys know.
Is there a room for Ty in the organization? Have you guys talked about that at all? Is there any place for him to stay around?
I'll say this. I would never rule that out. And, I'm sure, again, I don't want to speak for Ty or try to attempt to understand his range of emotions, from disappointment to anger to everything in between, but a good man who was a very good player, very good assistant, that led us well, through, a tough 3+ years where there was significant change in the personnel. So I wouldn't rule anything out just because he's, that high of character, and I'll say this as well. I think Ty is better for the position, or is going to be a better coach and potentially a better head coach for his experience. And it wouldn't surprise me at all to see him land on his feet to be a head coach and do very well going forward. If that doesn't happen, and he were to want to come back in some fashion, I don't think there's anybody within the organization that would prevent that.
Dennis, how do you weigh finding a coach to fit the personnel that you have here versus find the coach and then make personnel moves to fit that person?
Yeah, it's hopefully they won't be diametrically opposed. Hopefully, in best case scenario that we find both things as you lined them out. So, and that will be part of the criteria that we'll discuss moving forward. And again, we have to get through this period, and as we do that, we'll quickly come together and start talking about what we want to do moving forward relative to the search and the criteria.
Moving ahead for the next coach, I'm just kind of going back. Ty got 3 years and some change.
Yes, sir.
Is there a length of time that you guys are going to be looking for development in the new player? In the new head coach?
development and the new head
Well,
coach.
Ty came in a very tumultuous situation,
Sure.
we all
Yeah.
understand. And in 3 years, essentially, you've decided that it's time to move on,
Right.
despite all of that.
Right.
Well, the new person comes in, not quite in that situation, but certainly in a growing circumstance.
Yeah,
where
okay, I
it'll take
understand.
a little while before it gets going.
Yeah, so, our roster is what it is, right? And it's a very developmental roster with the youth of our team, and we have the ability to add 3 more young guys. I don't know if that will be the right thing. And so, under that circumstance, is it a new head coach with very little experience and they have to develop in that role, or is it someone that's more of a known quantity from a head coaching standpoint? I think it would be determined, that question, and the answer to that question would be determined by who we select. I think there's more known quantity out there as far as coaches, and there are some other coaches that you may want to speculate on, and you may need for them to develop in the job. And really, again, today, guys, we don't want to define, the search itself. We want to have the full menu of options out there, and we'll decide what's best going forward. But appreciate the question.
Have you talked to any of your players? Was that part of this process at all? Or?
So our player development staff, when we were sitting with Ty, and then there soon after, made the appropriate calls to our players to let them know that the decision happened. I will be following up. Randy and I split up the staff. We had our player development staff divvy up the players, and then, as you would imagine, I'll follow up with the players going forward.
Was Ty part of the exit interviews?
Yes.
He was.
Yes, absolutely.
Are Alex and Johnny still on the staff then? Is that-
So everybody's still technically under contract, Jody, and we'll talk more about the staff and existing staff going forward when appropriate, but it's not appropriate at this time.
Dennis, will this affect the contracts of, say, somebody like Gordon Hayward, depending on the coaching search?
Impact the contract? I guess in concept it could, but look, we've spent many years developing Gordon and, frankly, the other players. So our feelings, Randy, myself, Bob, Kevin, Justin, Walt, those, our opinions won't change. So relative to Gordon, the Miller family in particular. So I wouldn't think that it would have a huge impact. Because we see Gordon as someone that will be here, the duration of his career. At least that's our hope. So,
some franchises change coaches almost every other year. There's only been 4 in this franchise history. Did that go into making this decision even more difficult, given the stability of this franchise?
Without question, that weighed heavily on all of us.
Is there going to be any hesitation to talk to potential candidates that are on staffs with active playoff teams, or is anybody fair game, whether they're active in the playoffs or not?
We'll do it, guys, with the right professional decorum, and so any coach that we call that is under contract with someone else, we would have to call and ask for permission. So it won't be the wild west with our search. We have jazz and professional integrity that we want to stick to. And this is a little new to all of us, but we'll do it the right way. You can be assured of that.
You've referenced the tough 3 years recently. More specifically, you traded away Darren Williams a week into Ty's career as a head coach here. You also didn't give him much of a roster to work with. At least you went young this year.
Right.
How would you respond to the accusation that you haven't given him a fair shot?
Well, it's fair, and that opinion. I think there's degrees, right? And so the difference in that, I think Randy and Bob and Kevin and Walt and Miller family and I would argue is there's a difference between tough circumstances and fair circumstances, and so Kevin again made I think a very tough decision to have a franchise level point guard under contract for 2 years. But the reason why we got so much return on that is he got in front of that decision. He didn't deny the brutal facts that existed. There was a very good chance that Darren wasn't going to resign. So does it help Ty the year or two that he succeeded Jerry and helped his record? Absolutely. If Kevin would have kept him under contract, Randy and Bob as well, and the Miller family was part of that decision, and Darren then walks, you don't see Derek Favors in his canter. You can cut Trey Burke in half. There's no Marvin Williams. So again, guys, it's part of the challenge of the NBA. There's many different seats. You guys have your seat, and you play a role in the play, and so does management and scouts and coaches and ownership, and that's what makes our job so interesting, and it makes it so tough. But let's just take the Darren Williams decision. I think at the end of the day it was a good one, but certainly it's a tougher one for coaches, relative to the record.
What do you mean by cut Trey in half? Sorry. What do you mean by cut Trey in half?
I think one of the picks was Trey. I didn't mean to make light of that, but one of the picks we traded to move up for Trey was from that trade. So sorry.
No,
sorry.
you're fine.
Yeah. Was there a temptation at all for you or management to compare Ty and what Jeff was doing in Phoenix, given kind of the similarities and circumstances this year?
No, totally different circumstances, and we're proud of Jeff, and he did a very good job in short order, but nothing like that.
What was Ty's input on Gordon's contract situation, if any?
Yeah, I would never get into that. I know why you have to ask the question, and I'll say this: Ty and Gordon had high regards for each other, and I'll leave it at that.
Was there something you learned in the last 3.5 years of working with Ty that you can use in this coaching search?
Yeah, technically it's two, but a lot. I think, frankly, that's part of our challenge is to find a man that has the integrity and class that Ty has, and that's not lost on us.
Dennis, you have a pretty deep history with Houston and San Antonio. How much will you draw from that experience versus wanting to kind of build your own identity or keep with the Jazz identity here?
Yeah, so again, guys, it's not, I know why that question would be asked. It has very little to do with me. Now, do I steward the process and do I influence? But, Randy's been doing this a long time. Smitty's been doing this a long time. David Fredman, Walt Perrin, Kevin O'Connor, the new people that we've added, that the Millers have allowed us to add over the past 2 seasons. And so we'll come together and do it as a team. And, now certainly will, Greg Popovich's influence, Wyoming, will my Houston experience with Rudy and Jeff and Carol and Leslie influence me? Absolutely. There's no way to separate. It'd be like you trying to separate from your parents, right? So those will all have influences, but the team influence around the Jazz will dictate what we do going forward.
Did you talk to John Stockton at all about this decision and reach out to him?
Yeah, we're not going to comment on who we talked to and this and that, guys. But in no way you have to ask the question.
How much did wins and losses impact this decision on Ty?
Wins and losses. It was a 3-year decision, and I think clearly right after Darren was really a tough boat. There was troubled waters, and Ty gets credit for steadying the boat. And the 2 seasons after that, those were solid NBA clubs relative to the talent. And this year, there's no hiding behind the fact that we went extremely young, not just young, but extremely young. As Kevin O'Connor said, when we made the decision to go young, we didn't just dip our toe into that decision. We jumped all in. And as Ty said, that is a tough circumstance for coaches. But again, it was a 3+ year decision.
Is your opinion way heavier than anyone else's on this group that you're saying is going to make that decision?
So, Brad, I appreciate you trying to pin me down. I think Greg Miller's.
I got to try.
I think Greg Miller's opinion means more, and then I would say Greg, Gail, and Steve would be next, and I'll throw Randy under the bus. And I'm ways down on the pecking order. And look, I respect the chain of command. I respect authority. Everything that Greg said in regards to our decision-making process when I interviewed him has rung true. It's really, all decisions, but especially the monumental ones, are done collectively as a team, and frankly, that's what I believe in.
Just a couple more, guys.
If it wasn't wins and losses necessarily, then were you happy with the development this year? Were you, because you say you went extremely young, were you happy with the way Ty taught your young players in development?
I think you can find a lot of wins. I think with Derek Favors in particular, there was a real impetus to have Derek finish on paint catches, and specifically off 1 foot better. And Derek was outstanding this year, especially when Alex and Johnny got hold of him. You saw where Alec Burks was struggling to complete plays the first third of the season, and then he really turned that around with some real directed work. So there's a bunch of wins that you could see that Ty and the coaching staff and the development staff had. So, when we say, there were a lot of good parts, we really mean it.
How did you feel hearing Ennis say that offense is more important than defense the other day? Did that bother you?
Yeah, well, Ennis and I are going to have to take an aside. And no, look, there's no way to totally parse the possessions, and it's just offense and it's just defense, because there's transition both ways in between, right? So I think many of us want to say this is more important than that. What I find is important is everything. All the details really matter, and so you can be great offensively and be terrible defensively, and your season will end prematurely, and you can switch that ratio, and so you better be great at both at the end of the day.
Are there financial constraints to who you're going to be looking for in this head coaching, or has the Miller family kind of given you
We
a check?
have not discussed that one. Again, guys, we were trying to get through this decision first, and the Millers have not in any area, facility, coaches, we've added significant personnel, added development coaches, scouts around the globe. The practice facility we've upgraded to tune of hundreds of thousands of dollars. They have not shortchanged us in any way. Have we kept payroll low? Yeah, but we kept payroll low because of strategy and tactics and discipline. We want to be able to invest that money wisely, but the Miller family's fully committed to funding the program.
How much of a factor, or if any, was fan backlash, fire Ty hashtags, the negativity, the loss of support, fan attendance at that point?
Look at you. It's a little bit like the electronic herd, right? In stock markets, and things are driven, but I think, Jody, what the Miller family stands for on so many different fronts, and I think Ty at the time was the 6th or 7th most tenured coach, and so the tenure of coaches and the support of coaches, the Miller family can stand on firm ground, and the organization can stand on firm ground. And you would, many times you have to be aware of public opinion, but there's our own criteria that we were looking at. So and that one wasn't at the top of the list.
And some of your young players complained about the lack of minutes. They had expectations of higher minutes. Is it a fair criticism?
I don't think so. That rotations and are the 5 young guys, playing enough. I think Ty did an admirable job of that. I think year before last was very difficult because we had so many productive big guys that there's only so many minutes. And I think Ty managed that very well because Al stayed happy, Paul stayed happy. Ennis got the minutes that he appropriately deserved, as did Derek, and you had Jeremy, who didn't get to play much at all. So that was we were a little unbalanced relative to that, but all I know is I go back to the locker room and everybody was together last year. And so we cleared up that logjam, and I think the guys played the appropriate minutes and played the minutes that I think the coaches thought that they deserved. So that's not a huge negative.
Can you explain why Brandon Rush was not playing at all? What was there a divide there?
No, there were no subplots, disagreements. You know, a lot was going on with Brandon's rehabilitation, and per HIPAA laws, I can't get into a lot of details, but timelines relative to his rehabilitation were just set back, and by the time he became fully able to participate, the positions have been won by Gordon and Richard and Alec, those three guys, and those three wings actually performed very well. So again, there's nothing there.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Dennis.
Thanks, Dennis.